Delivery drivers of Reddit. What have you experienced on a delivery that you will never forget? Story 1. I used to deliver pizza. Favorite experience: the guy opened the front door and is smoking a joint. And then kittens come round the corner meowing, and start trying to climb my pant legs. The guy just giggles and giggles, so I put the pizzas down and play with the kittens for a while. He tipped me a 20. Story 2. I used to deliver edible arrangements. One time I was at a house in your average northeastern suburban neighborhood, and I had gone to the door with the arrangement but didn't get an answer. So I go back to my truck, put the arrangement in the backside door, and was standing outside the open passenger door facing the truck, trying to call the customer to see if they'd be home soon and I can leave, or if I should try to find one of their neighbors to take it in. As the phone is ringing, the customer's car pulls in the driveway, and so I hang up the phone and wave, and as they roll down their window I start to say, "Oh hi, I have a delivery for you," and the customer whose house this was just very calmly said, "I don't want to alarm you, but there's a bear right behind you." I turned around, and not 3 feet away was a young bear bigger than a cub, but not yet full grown, just sniffing around their bushes. I didn't know what to do, my legs just turned to jelly and I froze. So I said to the customer, "What do I do?" And she looks at me like I'm crazy and goes, "Get in the seat now." The smart thing to do would have been to jump into the passenger seat that I was literally standing right outside with the door open and everything, but in my nervous state, I slam the passenger door and run all the way around the long way around the truck, to SMH, and get in the driver's seat and lock the doors. The side door to the refrigerated side of my truck was still open, but at least I was separated from the bear. The bear didn't notice me until I slammed the door shut, but all he did was wander up to the side door and sniff the beautiful fruit arrangements in my truck. He hung out for a few minutes until the customer finally had enough and laid down on their horn until he took off running down the street. There were a few other interesting deliveries from that job, but none turned my legs to jelly like that bear. Story 3. I used to deliver pizzas. This one order was to a nice house in an okay part of town. I ring the doorbell and wait patiently for the door to open. When it does, I'm greeted by a lady and her young son. She's clearly been crying, but is doing a good job of holding them back. I don't acknowledge it. It's none of my business, and she's clearly not looking for solace from the pizza guy. I remind her what the pizzas cost, and she hands me some cash, standard stuff. As I'm digging around in my bag for change, the kid pipes up, "I have to tell you something." "What's that?" I say, half listening as I try to work out how much change to give back. "My dad's not coming home." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," I tell him. I stare at my bag as I pull out the last of the change, trying to avoid looking at either of them as I hand it back with the pizzas. As I leave, habits formed over 1,000 deliveries almost make me tell them have a good night, but I catch myself enough to say enjoy the pizza instead. Judging by his mum, the parents would have broken up some time that day. I'm guessing I'm probably the first person that kid told. I used to be a Domino's driver. Showed up at a woman's house and her toddler opens the door. Mum is sitting on the toilet, door open, facing me in all her glory, taking a. She's yelling at her toddler to get mummy's wallet from mummy's purse, and this kid can't be older than like 2. I can't tell kids' ages. So the kid, after like a good excruciating 5 minutes of yelling, manages to get mummy's wallet from mummy's purse. I feel like I can't intervene and take the money out myself because the mum will think I'm stealing, so we're both trying to talk this kid through paying me. Mum is yelling at the poor girl to get the orange note, and the kid pulls out her mum's Opal card instead of the 20. The kid starts crying. Mum is getting really agitated. It got to a point where I snapped and was like, "Look lady, you're gonna have to do this," so I got to wait until she finished shitting and then gave me the money without washing her hands. Pretty memorable experience. Story 4. I made a delivery and some form of small terrier bolted through the door and bit me hard enough to leave a mark through my winter gear. I let the owner know and he apologized because it wasn't his dog and he didn't know to anticipate that. It was his dad's dog in his dad's house and his dad was inside the house dying. The family had been sitting there trying to ease his passing for a day or so and needed that pizza to help sustain them. He wasn't overly emotional, but clearly wanted to be able to talk to someone about it. I'm the sort of person that wants to let people get all that out. Unfortunately, I was on the clock and really needed to get as many deliveries in as possible. I still feel like I should have stayed a little longer. Story 5. In near hurricane conditions, I was delivering subs for Jimmy John's. Took me a little longer than usual to get to a house. I'm completely drenched, standing in the rain because the front door didn't have a stoop. The guy opens the door and says, "Took you long enough," grabbed his sandwich and didn't tip me. Story 6. I worked as a delivery man for a small cakery. We would make custom cakes for anyone and any and all events. This one time I had to deliver a cake that had on it. When I came to the house and rang the bell, this lady opened up drunk as and just screamed saying the dick's here, so it was a bachelorette party. This lady just pulled me in with the cake and told me to bring the cake to the middle of the party. The price was 4,500 rupees or around 40, but they made it rain over me, so I had to pick it up and they didn't even give a tip. Then I came back to the cakery and got scolded because I got late. Edit, not India. Pretty close though. Also, every developing country has a upper middle class that celebrates Western culture like bachelorettes. Also, when this happened I had a girlfriend. I was just uncomfortable with the whole situation, but the last and more important thing was that they were kindy milfy. Story 7. I deliver pizza. I walked up to a trailer park house and knocked. Dude answers the door wearing a swastika armband and he's bald. I tell him the total and he invites me inside while he gets the money. There's 10 more dudes all bald, all wearing armbands. Sitting in a circle in metal chairs. Guy gives me the money. I go to leave. He grabs my arm and gets in my face and asks, "Do you like NRS?" I don't want to be murdered, so I respond nope, not at all, hate those, and leave as quick as possible. The scary part is every other delivery driver but me that night was black, and they might have never been seen again if I didn't take the delivery. Story 8. This literally just happened to me 30 minutes ago on a delivery. I'm an ice delivery driver, and some big box stores like for us to not only to deliver the ice, but also to stock the front of the store, which is a large insurance risk for us. So as my helper and I are dragging a pallet to the front, accompanied by a store employee, we all notice a foul smell. Let's just say it's a store not exactly known for the most cleanly of people. Before we can get to the front, a second employee runs up to us in a panic yelling, There's everywhere. Behind him is a literal trail of smears. Someone had pooped down their leg and dragged it probably 50 yards all over the store. They had one employee attempting to clean it with a shop vac. Cleaning, with a shop vac. Hey ice guy, can you help us out here? Yeah, no chance. Then I'm denying the delivery. So here I am writing this out 30 minutes later, sitting in the store manager's office explaining to him why the receiver denied a delivery. Also sorry for the formatting him on mobile. Story 9. Delivered pizza from about the day I got my license all the way through the rest of high school, university, and then as extra income during my first full-time job. Now I'm back to deliveries for Uber in Tokyo as a side job after 14-year hiatus. Back in about 1993, guy was trying to punch his wife and missed and got me instead. I GTFO'd, kept the pizza for myself, and called the cops once I got back to the store. This was before cell phones. I was delivering the night I turned 18. 12-year-old kid and his buddies saw me bring a pizza into a building and were waiting for me, pointing his jacket at me when I got out. Give me everything, I have a gun. No you don't, that's your finger. Where was a 12-year-old kid in middle-class suburban Canada going to get a handgun? Yeah, you're right. It was just a joke. Kid shouts over his shoulder as he and his buddies bolt. It was a snowy day in Canada, and some kids were hucking ice chunks at cars on the street, and one hit mine. I threw a handbrake turn as I put the window down. Sorry, they all shouted as they scattered. Edit. One nice story. It was my first winter driving and we had our first big storm. The store was open and they expected us to come in and work because of course everyone was ordering pizza because of the storm. I had no real experience driving in the winter, so my dad insisted on driving me around to all my deliveries. At the time I was an annoyed and ungrateful 16-year-old kid, but looking back on it, it was the greatest thing for him to do for his son. Story 10. I spent a summer as a delivery driver for Jimmy John's in a college town. There was a street where many of the houses were rented by fraternity and sorority members and passed down among the members from year to year. Needless to say, a lot of partying, and a lot of late-night JJs, went down on this street. So one weeknight, around midnight, I'm delivering a Hunter's Club and Turkey Tom to a house that, from the front, looks empty. I ring the doorbell, nothing, knock on the door, give my this ain't the police Jimmy John's delivery proclamation. Still nothing, try the doorbell again, nada, another knock to no avail. After waiting a minute or two in front of this dark, obviously unoccupied house, I decide to head back to the store. As I turn to leave the porch, I hear the click of a gate latch from the side of the house. I walk over and am met by a very intoxicated young man, buck naked, walking down the driveway. He looks right at me, a smile comes over his face, and in a Spicoli-esque burnout drawl, says Jimmy John's, yeah, and saunters off down the driveway onto the sidewalk. Perplexed by this exchange, and realizing the futility of requesting payment from a man with no pockets, I just got in my car and left. But to this day, any time I hear anyone say Jimmy John's, I think back to my Millette Street bro and say to myself, yeah, shared this on Tales from the Pizagui, so we'll share it again. I worked at a mom-and-pop pizza store. I was called up for a delivery, bagged the order, entered the address into my GPS, and set off. After about 12 minutes or so, I arrived. I walked up to the door, knocked, and was greeted by a woman and her daughter, probably around 10. I go through my spiel, hello, how are you, I have order, is that correct, okay, total is amount, and begin handing her the food. She turns to her daughter and says to her, make sure the dog doesn't. And can't finish the sentence before the Yorkie goes tearing out the door. They start to panic. The street wasn't busy, but it's a small dog in a town where animals hit by traffic is a common sight, sadly, and I try to calm them down, saying that I'd be happy to retrieve the dog. They oblige, and after I hand them the rest of their order, I go after the dog. This thing decides it's going to go running 4 houses down. The houses aren't too spread out, but it's still me chasing a dog in the middle of summer, wearing a black t-shirt in the dead of the afternoon. Anyway, I finally catch up to the dog, pick it up, and start carrying it back to the owners. I hand the dog back to them, get back to the business of them paying for the food, and I am rewarded with the princely sum of a 0.16 tip. You're reading that correctly, 16 cents for returning a Yorkie. Story 11. I was delivering medical supplies in Portland and the surrounding areas a couple years ago. I thought it was going to be a normal day when I woke up, but I was very much mistaken. I still have flashbacks of what I witnessed. I start my route by driving to the warehouse and receiving my deliveries. I log into the app on my phone and call dispatch so they can send me my route. Everything's going swimmingly, no red alarms at all. I wrap everything up there and head out on the road. The first delivery is out in Seattle, so I head on over there as quickly as I'm allowed and listen to my favorite podcast while I'm at it. Time passes by, I'm getting close to my destination, and I'm rounding a corner that has a lot of vegetation and is basically one of those hills that you have to brake the entire way down. This is where it all goes wrong. A couple of older people start crossing the road while I'm on this super steep hill that spirals down, and I start braking more, but it just wasn't enough. I hit a spot of ice and my van goes sideways and well they didn't make it, they should not have been walking down across that hill. But yeah, I call the police and tell them everything that happened. They arrive and start taking witness reports and stuff. By this time I've puked probably 5 times and have no idea what I'm facing here. Time passes. Cops come to me with a look on their faces. I'm literally sure I'm going to jail. Number 1, they left a suicide note on their table at the residential nursing home they lived at. They walked into my car together on purpose. Number 2, the delivery was for the lady that passed away. That still bothers me. She planned it because she knew a van was going to be coming down a blind corner. She my mind up for a solid year, and I even moved back to Florida to go to counseling and literally have never told this story, but it felt really good to get it out of my head. Story 12. My so was delivering boxes of magazines to a small shop. It was really early, like 4 a.m. The shop not yet open, but head leave them round the back by the door, rolls up, hops out of the van, grabs box and takes it to the spot, walks back to the van, and there was now a man sitting in the driver's seat. It was dark and no one else around, so he just yells to him to get out of the van but didn't approach. Next thing he knows the guy is out and running at him with something large and shiny in his hands, so freaks out and runs. The guy chases him. So doubled back around, jumped in the van and took off right as the guy caught up and slammed the object into the windshield. It shattered but stayed in place so he couldn't see but just drove out of there anyway. Eventually pulled over when safe to find an axe was lodged in the window, a full-sized axe. He was shaking too much to drive after that, so flagged someone down to call the cops. They never found the guy. Story 13. Had a delivery for a hotel at 2 a.m. on Saturday. I went to the front desk and they asked me to come to their room. I went and knocked and a middle-aged bald man answered with only his head poking out. I couldn't see the rest of his body. He opened the door and asked me to come inside and put the pizza on the table, which I did be. See, I'm an idiot. When I walk inside I see another middle-aged fat man sitting on the bed and the guy who opened the door closed it behind me. Then, I turned around and saw the door guy was only in a thong. Nothing happened and I left without saying a word, but it was definitely strange. Story 14. I pulled up to the house and there was a large German shepherd in the yard which was fenced and going nuts, barking and snapping at me. It takes me about 5 to 10 minutes of grappling with this dog to make it to the door, and it runs around the side of the house. So the folks open the door, pay for the food, and suddenly the dog bursts around the corner of the yard, slams past me and bolts into the house. He's sprinting in circles, freaking out and knocking stuff over including a nice-looking lamp that broke. The people there start losing their minds trying to stop the dog from turning the whole house into rubble. The one dude asks me why would you bring your dog with you on a delivery, which was an absolutely bonkers question that let me know this was not their dog. I helped them get it out of the house and they tipped me $0. Used to work for a pizza chain. I was mugged and shot, partial paralysis in my left leg. Never gonna forget that. Story 15. Heaps made a delivery on the 2nd of January. The guy opening the door was clearly drunk. Also he was wearing a bathrobe and nothing underneath, sausage and 2 veg clearly on display. Let me into the house, so I could get in the basement. Went past his living room where a bunch of people with not enough clothes to go around were merrily drinking. He was a regular customer, so he called me up a few days later to apologize. Got yelled at by a metric shitton of people, for blocking the street or driving too slowly. I in residential area, driving a 32-ton truck. Delivered pellets for heating to home a couple of months ago. Was a nice new home somewhere in the suburbs. Pellet deliveries take a while, so usually the people who live there start chatting to me. So I was chatting with the lady of the house and complimented her on nice new home. I almost always do this. People shell out insane amounts of money for their house. I might as well confirm their decision, especially because I'd like to deliver again the next time they need pellets. The woman started crying, because she didn't know anybody around. Her friends lived miles away and her husband was at work all the time. Or the other time when a father and his kid climbed in my truck. Mind you, if they had asked, I would have allowed it anyway. I sometimes even took dads and their kids for a ride around the block, if I had the time. But just getting in and playing with all those funky buttons, while I am at the end of the truck, trying to get the pellets to flow into their storage container and wondering why my remote didn't work. Not good. Never delivered that guy again. There are a ton more, if I can think of them. 1. Edit spelling. Gee, my English is getting rusty too. Edit just thought of 2 more. I had one of those golden waving cats in my truck cab. An Asian friend of mine gave to me, telling that it was supposed to wave the money in. Well, any little bit helps, so I mounted it just behind the windshield, so it would wave the money into my truck. Kids loved it and would always ask to see it. So I am on my way to another regular customer and had to brake quite hard, because somebody cut across my lane. The cat didn't like that and dropped onto the floor. I get to the regular's house, dad and his 2 sons already waiting for me in the yard. As I pull up to the curb, I see the face of the little one change. By the time I got out of the truck, he was in tears, because my cat was missing. It was the only reason why he was waiting or me. Well, thanks little buddy, and he was devastated that it was gone. The situation was quickly resolved, when I pulled the cat from the floor and explained what happened, and the last one pulled up to a new customer's house. Dad and his son are waiting for me. Sons begins to make faces at me and starts calling me bad names while I set up my gear. Dad keeps explaining that they don't believe in rules and that son had to find his own way in the world, so he could do whatever he wanted. Well, I am quite used to getting yelled at by strangers, so I tuned the little brat out. What made my day was when I was done sting up my toys and I was just about to start the delivery. Little brat came running and called me something very rude. The pellets are bound through a hose into the storage of the customer, so there was a big gray hose right through the garden. It was quite hard to overlook. Obviously little brat did just that, because he tripped over the hose, did a somersault and landed in mom's flowers. Lo and behold, there are rules after all, and he got into serious trouble with his mother. I hate to see kids getting hurt, but that one deserved it, and the dressing down by his mother was also very much needed. Story 16:1. Hot completely naked women answers the door. Wasn't even her food. 2. Car wreck right in front of me. 3. Someone complaining that there wasn't enough napkins. 4. Was told I was cute once. That was pretty cool. 5. Came back to my car to find a cat in my driver's seat. I left the windows down. Edit. Remembered another one. Added explanation for 3. Am not very good at stories, so that why I made them as short as a Korean's penis. I will explain the other if people ask. Explanation of number 3. This person made a huge deal out of it and yelled at me saying that one napkin isn't enough for all 8 inches, which she was right, it's not, but we are only allowed to give 1 napkin per sandwich. So I tell her I don't have any extra napkins to give because people don't normally complain about napkins. She then asks for the tip back. It was only 50 cents, so I just walk away and drive back to the store, and there was my manager waiting. He calmly asks, why did you verbally abuse your last customer? So I told him exactly what happened, and he said that she did not say any of that on the phone. So he picks back up the phone and says, "I'll be right with you," hangs up phone. Story 17. When I was about 6 months pregnant with my first son, I delivered for Papa John's in an area that was mostly not so great. Now, that area has the highest violent crime rate on average or something or other for our state, so that should tell you how bad it was about 10 years ago before it got downright awful. Well, one neighborhood in particular was the worst of the worst, and usually another driver would take it since I was pregnant, but that Friday night we were short and super busy, so I did it without hesitation. Gotta eat after all, right? So I get there, get out of my truck with a pizza, and get a really bad feeling. Quickly look around and see a group of guys watching me. I put on my war face more or less, and as a second thought, stuck my big belly out a bit so it'd be way more obvious in the dark. One of them approached me and was like, "Oh, you pregnant?" I just shrugged and said, "Yeah, that definitely ain't a basketball, dude." He chuckled at that, walked back to his friends, and I heard him say, "Nah y'all, come on, she's pregnant." They all walked away and the dude that I'd spoken to gave me a nod and smile, told me to take care. Found out later that one driver had been brutally beaten in that lot less than a couple months before I'd been hired, and if I hadn't been pregnant, I might suffer the same or worse. Glad that didn't happen. Story 18. Used to delivery appliances for a company that had a contract with the city we were based out of. Essentially the contract would allow low-income residents a voucher to obtain second-hand kitchen appliances. We went to deliver a fridge to a lady, and on arrival her mother opened the door. Not only did she open the door, but her almost lifeless body could not stop the weight of the door, and she fell on the ground cracking her head open. She was probably on her third 40 ounces of some off-brand malt liquor. The kicker is though, she was watching her daughter's 2 children, called 911 to inform them and stayed until help arrived. Not sure whatever happened to these kids after that, but I hope they were not affected too greatly by this lady's choices. Truly some sad in this world. TLDR had to drop a fridge off for work. Lady who opened the door was up, fell, cracked her head open, also was watching her daughter's children. Real sad. Edit affected not affected. Story 19. I used to be a delivery driver for Japanese restaurant in college. Probably the most memorable delivery I had was one afternoon to a vet. I had delivered there a few times before, and it was always the same receptionist ordering a chicken and steak hibachi and an avocado roll. She was really nice, probably in her 40s and tipped well. That day I get there and there was a dad there with his 2 kids there in the waiting room, and all 3 of them were crying their eyes out. They had to put down their dog and it was really hard on all of them, especially the dad. I can still clearly remember the sound of his voice as he wailed and sobbed. I had a dog myself that I loved very much and who was getting on in years himself, so seeing them in such pain was hard for me to keep my composure. It was also extremely awkward for me to complete this transaction and seeing them hurting so bad next to me. I really wanted to tell them how sorry I was about their loss, but decided to just let them mourn. When I got back to the car, I started crying myself thinking of just how terrible it was going to be when I finally lost my best friend, Snoopy, because he had been at my side since I was 10 years old. Since that story is very sad and emotional, I'll also talk about a pretty funny delivery I had. I was sent to this house with an order of a steak hibachi and a couple of sushi rolls that added up to something like $19.60. I like to call before I got to a place, just to give people a bit of a heads up, so by the time I got to the door it was already open. In the doorway stood a chubby kid, about 9 or 10 years old that reminded me a lot of the kid from Bad Santa, but without the curly hair. I tell him the total as I pass off his food. He hands me a 20 bill and with a straight face he smugly says, "Keep the change, pal." Immediately after, he closes the door and I stood there for a second trying to process what just happened. When I got back to my car I noticed the time and realized it was way too early for that kid to be home from school. I couldn't help but laugh at the whole situation. No wonder he sounded a bit cocky when he told me that I could keep the 40 and change. This kid probably faked being sick so he could stay from school and was probably in there watching TV or playing video games while eating sushi and feeling like a big shot. I know I would have at that age. Story 20. As a veterinarian, I often take animals away after being euthanized, organize cremation, and then deliver the ashes back to the owners if I did the euthanasia at home so they don't have to deal with a random stranger from the crematorium delivering the ashes back to them. They appreciate this. One Sunday when I was off duty I knew I was going to be in the area of a client whose pet's ashes needed returning, so I was not in uniform, and the ashes came in a plain white paper bag at the time with everything inside it. I rang the doorbell, waited, saw the curtain move and someone peer out, and then nothing. So I knocked on the door again, someone came again, looked longer, and then opened the door. They started with a jump, and then apologized. Sorry, I didn't recognize you without your uniform and stethoscope. I thought you were a fast food delivery guy. I looked at the bag in my hand and bit my tongue hard, as my body desperately wanted me to hand over the package saying, "1 dog extra crispy." I instead said the usual courtesies and drove home, but I still wonder what would have happened if my mouth had run ahead of my brain. Story 21. Not me, but my dad was a FedEx delivery driver. One place he was knocking at the door waiting for an answer and then begins hearing heavy breathing behind him. Slowly he turns around to see a ostrich staring at him. Second one, he made a delivery to this man's country farmhouse. As you walk to the house you can clearly see into the barn. As he was approaching he saw bodies hanging from the scaffolds. Turns out the guy was big into doing special effects for movies and helped with Silence of the Lambs. Story 22. Husband tells me his wife lost a bet and has to take a picture with a pizza boy. I was 19. She comes around the corner naked and pretty hot, then hands me a marker. He says I can write anything on her anywhere. I write pizza on her and smile for the camera. She smiled and pressed her on the glass door waving as I left. Best delivery ever. Story 23. It was my first day. I had moved back home after getting my degree, so I started delivering pizza. After a few successful deliveries, I had an order a few miles out. It was a fairly big order but nothing too massive, so I head out and when I get to the address there were birthday balloons attached to their front gate. I knock on the door and this 10-year-old boy stood there just in his underwear, like literally just his briefs. I have never felt so uncomfortable. Well, he shouts at his mom to get the money for his food, and he just stands there awkwardly staring at me, not even blinking. It was so freaky. Well, his mom gives him the money to which he hands it to me, and I give him the food. I had the distinct impression that food was just for him, but yeah, never have I left a place feeling so dirty as I did then. Story 24. I delivered to a guy once at a call center who was wearing extra-large sweatpants and you could clearly see what looked to be some sort of massive tumor between his legs pressed up against his pants. It was huge, like almost beach ball huge and lumpy, and I don't think I'll ever get that image out of my head. Story 25. So this is kinda long story, bear with me. In 1999, I was a poor 25-year-old working for a pizza delivery company. This day started off like any other. I woke up, got dressed, and went to work. At around 11ish is where our story truly begins. I remember playing video games on an old arcade machine. I was pretty good if I do say so myself. Then the owner, a guy named Tony, yelled at me that a pizza was ready to be delivered. I wasn't in the best position in my life to be yelled at like that, so I dejectedly complied. I got on my bike and began pedaling. On the way I saw multiple parties. My girlfriend cheating on me. We broke up right there, and then I arrived. Now I probably would have noticed how weird the building was, but then I was too depressed to care. I walked in and began wandering, looking for the correct address. When I found it, it was this weird room with lots of science stuff in it. I called for the name of the person who ordered the pizza, but nobody was there. Then I realized that it was a prank call, and I'd have to pay for the pizza. I sat down at a table in the middle of the room and slipped out a beer from somewhere. I don't remember. Anyways, it was New Year's Eve, so a big countdown was going on outside the building. I looked over, said, "Hey, race to another lousy millennium," and leaned back in my chair. I fell off into one of those science machines. Then I was frozen for 1,000 years, woke up, and began working for Professor Hubert Farnsworth. Edit. Thanks for the gold. Story 26. Domino's driver here. At a store I used to work for, had these regulars in a rich subdivision that would order once every couple of weeks. Always drunk and barely dressed, he would answer in shorts. She would be peeking out behind the door in some form of lingerie nightie. Always later in the evening, great tippers. One night she comes out completely naked, talking about how they used to do this all the time back in Georgia, Florida here. Took a picture with her, got my tip and a great memory, and left. If she remembered it at all, she never mentioned it the next time I saw her. Once delivered to an Indian guy in a hotel. Paid with a credit card but tipped in cash, more specifically, a Canadian $5 bill. Happened a few years ago. Still have the bill. Where am I going to spend a Canadian $5? Watched a guy get pulled over. We were sitting at a light, he in the left lane, I in the right. Light turns green, and we go. I get up to a comfy 50 miles per hour, speed limit was 45. Didn't realize the cop was behind me until just before the other guy got fed up and gunned it to get in front of me. Laughed all the way to my delivery. Story 27. Not me, my brother. He's not on Reddit, so I guess he could not care less if I share. Parcel delivery. Signature required. Pretty girl opens door. ID like a signature and your number please. He gets both. They're married for about 3 years now. I guess that's one delivery he's not going to easily forget. P.S. I'm still amazed that cheesy line worked. But I guess when it has to happen, it will happen no matter what. Story 28. I occasionally pick up delivery routes at the supermarket I work at part-time. And the range of customers is crazy. The city has 2 universities, loads of students, and a buttload of elderly and highly self-entitled, not mutually exclusive customers. The system we use for delivery is at NAV. Shows us customer comments right before each delivery, usually consisting of instructions like there is a lift to the right as you enter. Additionally, we are a fairly small branch, and so the comparatively smaller line we stock is made known to customers when ordering. If you don't want items to be substituted if unavailable, you mark it as so when ordering, not a hidden button. The other week, this lady had put a note to give her a call 45 minutes before I arrived, as if she was the only customer to whom I was delivering. The note went on to tell me not to even bother bringing any substitutions as she does not want them. I immediately knew this was going to be an issue, as I could see there was about 67 crates for this customer. I was only a 10-minute drive away, so called and apologized that I couldn't do so sooner. She said it was fine, and that she would be waiting outside to meet me, describing how I could identify her upon my arrival as the two unmistakable ladies. It turned out to be a mother and daughter, and the order was a food shop for the daughter at uni, which the mother had placed. Without any cue, the daughter began going through the crates removing items saying not this, that isn't organic, this is cruel, that has oil in it, definitely not that, OMG why did you order those, like an ungrateful little something. She also berated her mother for not ordering certain things, and got stroppy when she didn't find certain other items right away. The mother said, "Oh, I'm sure the man will be able to get you this," as if I had the entire stock of the shop in the back of my van. When I explained I couldn't do this, she began pointing at other crates saying, "But you have this there, a different customer's order." The mother begins to tell me how she's never shopped online before, and her daughter has a very strict doctor-ordered diet. Whether she did or didn't isn't really my concern, but it certainly came across as the daughter having other reasons. Again, it's not my concern, but she shouldn't have gotten her mother to order, and perhaps should have shopped from somewhere which catered to her needs more. When I also explained that I can't just give her other items from the van, she said, "But every other time I've ordered they've done so and so, first order, sure." Now the real part that pissed me off is how the daughter had pulled things from the crates on my system. I have to find each item individually from each crate number, and then manually remove them, which means I have to know which crate they were in originally, since usually it's only 1 or 2 items that get sent back. A lot of the items were fresh as well from the meat fish counters, meaning they had to be binned. Anyway, they got impatient, angry, and unreasonable, and I was late to all the remainder of my drops. That's only one of many stories.